I found this to be a really fun challenge. I like a bit of spatial, it's fun to build macros. So let's talk you through it. In our first input, we have just the flower shop. So we've got 3 fields telling you the lat long and the name. So we can use our make points, create points tool in order to turn those latitudes and longitudes into spatial objects. So when I see that, if I just load that up, there we go. There's our little, that's where our flower shop is. Similarly, we have a similar kind of input for our customers. So we've got all of our customer names, information about their lats and longs, and then a couple of other fields about the date that the order was placed and the order amount. So I cleaned up this name field first of all, just did a trim around the name to get rid of the trailing white space, or leading white space, sorry, I think it was. And then I, as per the requirements, filtered it down to the anything before the 8th of May is able to be delivered, have to have spent at least $50 in order to get it delivered. So then I turned it into our spatial points, and there they all are. Now at this point I went into building the macro initially. I didn't really realize I misinterpreted basically the requirement that we're only going to consider the closest 30 customers to the store. I thought it was just like, okay, we just decide who's the closest from where we're delivering to, but that's not the case. So we also need to have one of these find nearest tools outside of the macro. So just doing the what's the closest 30. I just did a maximum of 100 miles so that we got 30 output, and now these are our points. So I only kept in the output all of the kind of customer locations. I wanted to keep the flower shop separate and just kind of union that back on. I thought that was the easier way to do that in my head. It was kind of how my macro was already set up. So you can see that I've got these from and to fields that I kind of update within the macro so that you always know which is going from, which is going to, and so on. So let's just go into the macro then. So sorry, that's our 31 records with flower shop there. I realise there's probably many different ways I could have attacked this problem, but this is the way that I went with personally. So in the macro itself, we split out that from and to, so we just get Flora's shop and all the other customers at the first iteration. So we do again a find nearest, we just want the first one now. And then we keep all those fields. So in one of our offshoots, we just keep the, so where is the customer that they're delivering to, rename that to be name and centroid, keep the original from to, so now that will be from instead of to in the input. So now with our starting point is from Michelle Collins rather than from the flower shop. So we do that, we make sure we get rid of Michelle Collins from the from list, so we make sure we do that join, ignore the J output, just take through the other 85 customers. I think this is a longer list because it's before I did the find nearest, but that's okay because obviously it gets updated with the data that comes into the macro anyway. So that would only be 29, for example, if I had the correct list here. Union those back together, so then I have my updated from to list. You can see we don't now have Flora's flower shop in there, and then in the, so that's going to be our iteration output. That'll cycle back round to the start, and then for the rest of the configuration, we want to just have what was the point that got delivered to. So just keeping that universe name and centroid there. Have I done exactly the same kind of thing? Almost. But yeah, similar kind of thing, but keeping the distance in there as well, adding on a stop as the iteration number +1, because the iteration number starts at 0. I want it to be stop number 1 instead of stop 0. Okay, so then what comes out of our macro looks like this. Looks like all the stops that were made, not including the flower shop. So we've got there, yeah, it goes to Michelle, then from Michelle it goes to Victor, so on and so forth. So to get our first output, nice and simple, just need to sum up those miles traveled. And then to start building our map, we need to build a line sequence of how she goes. And we also need to just bring in the different things that we need for our report map, the different layers. So first of all, in order to make the line, Then we need to union our output back to our flower shop so that we know where the flower shop starting point is, so that can be included in the line. And then we use a, what's this tool called? It's called a polybuild, that's the one. So sequence polyline centroid, our sequence field is the stops. We don't need to group it by anything. And then we'll see that's how we get our line. Then we just need to bring in an input. So the second input I brought in was just the flower shop as its own input. So let's see. Oh, sorry, I haven't showed you how to configure for the line yet either. So in the layers, I just went to add in the lines layer, add in connection number 1. So that gives us this line here. I didn't redo any changes to that. That comes through as I want it to be. For number 2, I brought through, added the points layer, number 2, and then expand here, my stylized, I just made sure that I changed the point style to be a star rather than a blue diamond and colored it yellow. It's nice that you can always see the little point there, so you know that it's worked the way you want it to. And then finally, I just brought from the macro output, that's connection number 3. So added in another points layer from number 3 to get my blue diamonds. And I didn't really change anything there, but I did want to add on labels for those. And for labels, I have to go back to the data layer, go to number 3, and say that I want to label it. So I use the stop field to label that, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And that gives me the opportunity to customize the style of the label here. I think that mine is still a bit thick. I don't really know why it's a bit thick. I kind of tried to find everything. I tried to get rid of the buffer and stuff, but that's what I came out with. So hopefully that's useful. Hopefully that talks you through some of the logic behind what you do to create this map. So thanks very much for watching, and see you in the next video.